Hello, and welcome to My Therapist's a Witch. My name is Elizabeth, and I have a master's in somatic psychology. I'm working on being a therapist. I am so excited to be back. I've taken a little vacation, and I thought this new series, I would begin with the foundation of my master's degree, which is somatic psychology, talking about what is it, my personal take on it, and how I've really used that to be the foundation of many of my practices, both psychological and also within witchcraft. So before we dive into the juice, I thought we could just take a moment to invite our bodies to fully arrive. So find yourself in a comfortable position, giving space for your body to be as comfortable as possible. And just slowly start to feel that sensation of gravity pulling down on your whole body. And as your body naturally begins to ground and settle, simply notice in this moment how your body has weight and your body breathes. And allowing for space and time to slow down, perhaps to include the natural pace and rhythm of the body. And as we slow down together, simply noticing inside yourself what starts to arise at a slower pace. Thank you for doing that practice with me. This is something I do every single day, and I can already tell that I feel much more arrived in my body. Moving a little bit into what is somatic psychology. My personal take on it might be a little different than other people, but somatic psychology basically is the practice of including the body in psychological processes. So, for example, traditional talk therapy relies on the channel of we're really going to analyze, we're really going to think about these things, and you're going to really understand what's happening in a very cognitive, logical, analytical way. And traditionally, what people imagine with talk therapy is that there's two people sitting, one's a therapist, one's a client, and they're talking about their day, talking about their feelings, talking about how that makes you feel. The difference with somatic psychology is that we are including the body in that process. So yes, there is talking. Yes, there is inquiry. Yes, there is to some degree a cognitive process happening. But we're slowing things down to track our body, become aware of perhaps our nervous system responses to the story that we're telling. We are becoming curious about what sensations, physical sensations, start to arrive as we're in this process. And within somatics, there's this concept of bottom up. So rather than, say, me coming into a session, if I'm a client, and being like, this is what I want to talk about today, I might begin by simply, I'm noticing that I feel this pit in my stomach, this feeling in my stomach. And we might start there with like exploring, what does that mean? What's there? And slowly using that to come up into consciousness. For me personally, I believe that the body is heavily connected to our unconscious. So this is why, particularly with trauma, sometimes CBT and more cognitive forms of therapy don't really work, especially if it's complex trauma, because there are things that have become too much for our body to handle, and then they move into the unconscious realm. And if they're unconscious, you can't see them. They're not there. And when I mean they're not there, they're not in the side of the mind. They're not always clear. They're very fuzzy, but there's always perhaps some level of somatic influence that our unconsciousness has on our body. So in a way, the body is a bridge to the unconscious, to the things that drive us, to the fears that we have long since suppressed and avoided. And if we're now shifting to include a little bit more of the magical realms, that's our shadow. That's where the shadowy bits of us exist. The things that we don't want to look at, the things that we really don't want anyone to know about us, the things that we would rather avoid at all cost than accept. So this, to me, makes a lot of sense why many folks can struggle with somatic work, especially if there's been a history of dissociation or avoidance strategies or even survival strategies where you could not safely be in your body. So when we start to include the body again, when we start to arrive back into it, there is typically a lot of distress. And this is where I come into the practice of the word understand. I really believe that each individual person, that their body knows instinctively what to do to protect them. And even though, there are sensations and feelings in the body that, can sometimes lie or can sometimes be something we don't inherently need to really look at. If we give our body the grace to be, everything that is happening is this body trying to protect me. It has learned to do this over time. So if entering the body again with awareness brings up a lot of uncomfortable feelings, a lot of distress, it's normal for that process to be met with a lot of resistance. So the practice of understand is not a cognitive method for me. To understand is when we invite an experience and we stand under that experience to include our body in the realm of sensation, in how it feels. And this process needs often a lot of titration, meaning that we need to do it slowly and a little bit over time, so that when those feelings arise, we can bring our mindfulness practice into really understanding, standing under those sensations to learn why they're there, how they function, what greater purpose that they're serving. So for me, somatic work is this deeply intimate and curious process that we can have with ourselves. And in a way, it's bringing this interest, curiosity, a little bit of magical thinking into our body and into our relationship with it. So as a somatic therapist, as someone who has been doing this for a while and who has embodied a lot of these practices, how does this influence me in my day-to-day, and how does this start to influence my magical practice or what I do to have a deeper relationship with myself. For me, it's brought me into this realm of understanding, standing under experiences, that when I take the time to slow down and really feel into my body, really have the tolerance to be with whatever is present in there, that more of myself emerges, that more resilience comes online. And that often I learn from my body that the thing that I thought was really irritating me or bothering me or the source of my suffering actually wasn't what I thought it was. So in this, my body has become this sort of perpetual journey of cycling through these patterns of shadow work. And I think these cycles and these patterns, I think we all go through them. I think it's very normal that we kind of stray away from our body and our embodiment, that we get caught up in the patterns of our day-to-day lives. Very easy to get caught up into the mind when we live in a very cognitive culture. But eventually some distress starts to arrive. Either, it slowly creeps in for me and that I start to feel burnt out, or I start to feel more anxious around things that I normally don't feel anxious about. And often, even in me, there is this resistance, this kind of part that really doesn't want to go there, that really doesn't want to look at myself in that way, that really doesn't want to feel what is present. But when I catch that pattern and when I go, oh, okay, yeah, this is what's going on, and I slow down and I stay with my feelings, I don't judge my feelings, I stay with them. I take the time to stand under them, giving my body full permission to feel whatever is there. Often I learn what's really bringing those feelings up. So again, it's this bottom-up process. It's starting with the sensation that's in my body, being curious, staying with it, feeling it, letting my imagination really consume that sensation. And sometimes this can be my unconscious realm gives me an image or a color or a sound. And I can, as this sensation changes and moves in my body, my imagination kind of goes. And it's this sort of internalized free association that I do, where I'm opening my mind up to symbols. I'm opening my mind to include my imagination, my creativity, how my body naturally begins to organize chaos. So even though somatic work can be incredibly uncomfortable, there's also the possibility for this great reward, wherein the more capacity I have to feel the distress, to feel the sensations that I don't enjoy feeling, that are either painful or disruptive or sad or just deeply, deeply painful to be with, I often find that when I grow my capacity to be with the darker side, more capacity to feel the lighter side emerges. I have more of a window to feel joy, to feel pleasure, to be in connection with other people, and to include my body in that experience. Now, I'm not going to lie, this can be a really overwhelming practice, and it's not something that I'm perfect at yet. Again, those cycles, those patterns come in, I'm out, I remember, ooh, I stand under, I feel, then I'm back in my body, then I'm back in that positive relationship. And so I want to make space for that. It's really natural and normal for us to do a lot of bypassing with our feelings. It's easier to think about the way we feel than to actually be with our feelings. Like, even if you just take a moment to pause and sit with that. Like, how quick is it to say, I'm feeling sad? Our brain naturally goes there rather than to slow it down even more and go, there's a weight in my chest. There's this void feeling there. Feels cold. It feels contracted. Like, that's not something we typically do. So moving back a little bit more, I really include my body in my spiritual and magical practice. I think that spell work and witchcraft is an inherently somatic practice. And I'm sure if you have gone down that rabbit hole of learning about those practices, there is a deep connection to mindfulness and including the body in our sensations, right? Like feeling our energy, feeling our power, feeling the sensations that start to arise when we enter into non-ordinary states of reality. And I think one of the powerful things about witchcraft is ritual. When we can ritualize the practice of being with our body. And there's something that happens when we can kind of suspend our logical, critical mind just a little bit. When we can give it up to God, so to speak, and explore in this realm a new way of being with ourselves. So I tend to learn a lot through story. So I'm going to tell you a little story about me before we close. Way back before I started my graduate school program, I thought I was a pretty embodied person because I was a dancer, I was an actor, I was quite a physical actor, so I was very animated and I felt, yeah, I'm in my body, I get it. But I was in a constant state of running away from my feelings. I overworked myself. I was always moving my body in this bypassing way, truly, if I'm being honest, where I would exercise all the time. I would go out dancing all the time. I would be moving physically all the time. And what that did was it quieted the sound of my suffering to myself. Because I was physically always so sore, because I was overexerting myself, because I was always so tired, because I was staying out late, dancing and, being in this kind of consuming state of mind, I never took the time to actually slow down and be with myself. So as I entered into my graduate school program and I started learning more and more and more about somatic psychology and really feeling into this new rhythm and pace, which was much slower than where I typically lived, I found it really, really difficult to be with myself. There was this part of me that would do anything to not have that experience. I would either constantly be on social media. I would either be dancing in my room by myself. I would be moving my body in some way to avoid the inner states that when I started to really slow down, I felt consumed me into a deep state of depression and collapse. So what really helped me, what was my gateway into my body, truly, was ritualizing the practice, ritualizing slowing down, and making that experience pleasurable. And this is something that I'm really into, which is how can we make the healing journey beautiful? How can we make it enticing? How can we make it delicious in some way? And those questions, that's for you to decide. That's for you to answer. But for me, it was making that journey both divine and magical. So I quite literally would, on like certain cycles of the moon, I would make my space absolutely beautiful. I would ritualize cleaning. I would kind of metaphorically get the old stagnant energy out of the way. I would light all of the candles in my house. I would adorn my body in a beautiful way. And as I was doing these tasks, as I was making my space beautiful, I was slowing down in my mind to really be with my body as these things were happening. I was taking time to really observe, how does my body respond when I'm in a beautiful space? It slows down. I'm excited to be with myself. I really like making this space beautiful. And this is what is starting to allow me to sit more and more and more on the cushion of my mindfulness practice, sit more and more and more within the realms of my body. After a time when I really kind of let myself go and I was like, I am fully stepping into my witchiness. I am, calling in my guides. I am making my house look like, a witchy plant mom cottage in a way. And by allowing that part of me to step forward and being in that practice, stepping more and more into the realms of witchcraft, it was my gateway back into my body. And it made everything have meaning. It made sitting with myself, even when I didn't want to, it made being with the parts of me that were distressing and I hated these feelings. It gave me a way in to truly and really sit with them, integrate them, and learn that I actually need them. For me, I really feel as human beings and particularly as women that we're taught to disconnect from our body. Even the fact that we have a cycle, that we have periods, and that once a month we're kind of in pain, our brain is foggy, we are not fully operating, but yet we still have to get up and go to work and pretend like we're fine. That process of perpetually and constantly ignoring our body and the state that it's in further perpetuates this disconnection and this attachment to overanalyzing and logically trying to reason our way through things. So for me, somatic work is inviting the illogical. It's inviting a bit of whimsy. It's inviting curiosity of like, what happens if we just pretend for a moment? What happens if we get really curious about this sensation that you don't think really has any meaning? What happens when we move with grace and with reverence into those sensations that you have been avoiding for your entire life? And now look, not every sensation that is uncomfortable is going to have this great story or this great meaning. Sometimes a sensation is there because it's just there. Sometimes you feel bad just because you feel bad. But I think there is a space for including the realm of sensation within the process of understanding ourselves. And that's really what psychology is. That's really what therapy is about. It's about you building a deeper relationship to yourself. It's about you standing under your body, your sensations, so that you truly understand yourself. You understand why you do things. You understand how you've gotten to this point in your life. And you understand what you can do and just how agent you are in your own experience and process. So for me, the body is really the way. It is a tangible and physical bridge for us to dive into our shadow work, to dive into the unconscious realms and to learn what truly drives us, what really is the energy that is moving us through life. And when we can take the time to learn the language of our body and build a relationship where we can talk to it and where we can really listen to what it's saying, rather than feeling like life is happening to us, we move into a new level of awareness where perhaps life is happening for us. These sensations are arising for us to experience and be with because there's actually a gift on the other side. There's more vitality. There's more of us than we ever imagined possible that can arrive to the surface. Before I filmed this episode, I pulled a tarot card and it was the Hierophant. And for me, I thought that was so poignant. And I tend to let my mind really go with tarot. I think it's, a little tool to help us connect to our unconsciousness. And for me, that card really symbolizes the journey into our unconscious realms, the journey that we often try to avoid, that maybe we get stuck in. And it's an invitation to take our time, slow down, notice how our body has weight and our body breathes, and listening. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'll see you again shortly. Take care.